Okay, listen, pay attention, Africa. Pay attention, Akebulan. Let me teach you something that has been confusing a lot of people when it comes to history. Even historians find it difficult to differentiate these two. Pay attention. Have you find out that most times when people say Ethiopia is the only African country that was not colonized by any European power, people usually say, what about Liberia? What about Liberia? Aisha Speed was in Ethiopia, and he was told that that is the only African country that was not colonized by any European power. People were saying in the comment section, what about Liberia? What about Liberia? And you don't blame them, because Liberia was not officially colonized by any European power. But why then do the prestige and that recognition of not being colonized by any European power usually attributed to Ethiopia alone? Why? That is what I'm going to explain. Pay attention. Modern day Tank Crier is going to diagnose it using different examples for you with things relevant to today's society. Pay scrupulous attention. The voice of Africa is about to teach. Pay attention. You see, yes, Ethiopia was not colonized by any European power. Never. It was never colonized. It was attacked, but it fought and regained her stand. Pay attention. You see, most times when Eurocentric historians want to discredit the African effort and resistance towards colonization, they tell you that Ethiopia was not colonized because Ethiopia was not attractive. That is a blatant lie. Ethiopia was attacked by Italy. Italy tried twice, but they failed. Emperor Menelik II and Empress Taitu Brutu and other generals of Ethiopia stood their ground and fought and defeated the armies of Italy in the War of Adowa, 1896. They stood their ground and won. Ethiopia was never permanently dominated. In my next video, I will tell you why I do use the word permanently dominated. Okay? Although there was an half occupation of Italy in Ethiopia in 1930, but Ethiopia quickly regained her sovereignty and stood her ground. She was never a colony of any European power. That has been established. Pay attention. Now let's talk about Liberia. Liberia was never colonized by any European power. Now the question is, Tank Crier, why then do we not give her that prestige as not being colonized by any European power? Pay attention. Yes, Liberia was not colonized by any European power. She was never a colony of any European power. But listen, it was perceived to be a settler colonized state. Pay attention. Let me explain. You see, the place you see today as Liberia, okay, was created in the year 1800s. 1800s. It was created by American Colonization Society, okay? A group that was based in United States. African Americans, most people say it is Black Americans, but there's no such thing as color, so I refer to them as African Americans. African Americans were sent to settle in the place you know today as Liberia. They returned in the 1800s. These settlers, African Americans, are called Americo-Liberians. Americo-Liberians. So they settled in Liberia in the year Liberia was created, 1800, specifically 1822. Okay? Now pay attention. These settlers, okay, they were the one that structured the system. They controlled the government. They controlled power. They controlled the land system over a century. Pay attention. Now, what most people miss is this. These settlers, African Americans that came and settled, in the return in 1800, okay, historians perceived that the indigenous Liberians were excluded from power. What do we mean by indigenous Liberians? Both Liberians are indigenous, but you have to understand that the ones that came from America met people in the already existing land, because they did not come with the land from America. The land has always been in Africa. So when they came, they met people there. Most historians refer to the people that they met there as what? Indigenous Liberians. But no, we chose not to use the word indigenous Liberians. Why? Because both the African Americans that returned in 1800 and the African that they met in that land are both indigenous to the land, because an African is indigenous in Africa. So what do we refer to the people that they met when they came in 1800 to settle? We refer to them as earliest settlers of Liberia, okay? Just like in Nigeria, okay? Just like in other countries. But let me use Nigeria as example. In Nigeria, just as you see the other ethnic groups as early settlers more than you see the Fulanese, because history has it that they came from the Senegambia. Do you understand? So the early settlers of Liberians were excluded from power. The settlers who came in 1800, who are the African Americans that settled in Liberia, governed them using English, using American system, and what? A structure that functioned as a what? Colonized elite. Colonized elite, not a colonial power, because them are coming from a system that is already advanced. So they brought that American system to Liberia and used it to govern the earliest dwellers of Liberia. Let me give you a practical example. If you have been following Speed tour in Africa, when Speed went to Liberia, something happened. He was introduced to a family called the Watkins family. The man introduced himself as Richard Watkins and his family.
So Watkins from Maryland County. Watkins? Yeah, we from Ohio and we settled in Maryland. So we are Watkins. You are Watkins? Watkins.
Yes, the Watkins family.
Watkins family.
From the global tribe.
My name is Francis Watkins, and this is Alfred Watkins.
These are your family.
So we are your family. We settled from Ohio and we went to Maryland County. So this is our dress code. This is how we dress.
This is how
we're the global people.
Yes. Yes.
Telling Speed that they are from the same lineage. They told Speed that they knew the place where their ancestors were living in America, in Ohio, before they came to Liberia. They showed him their culture, that they are all from the same lineage. That is to say, some persons in Liberia can actually trace where their ancestors moved and returned to Liberia. These ones, you can call them as the settlers and not the earliest dwellers. So, the system that governed Liberia was not an African indigenous system. It was an imported American system, because those dwellers, settlers that came to Liberia brought an American system and governed the earliest dwellers. So in as much as they were not governed by any European power, the structure, the system, the element that was used in governing Liberia was not an indigenous African functional one, but as an alien system in Africa. That is why we say, in as much as Liberia was not colonized by any European power, the system that governed it was functioned to be what? A colonial settler system. Are you following? So when historians say that Ethiopia was the only African country that was not colonized, they are talking about the African country that was not colonized by a foreign power over indigenous Africans. So we say Ethiopia is an African sovereign state preserved, while Liberia is independent on paper but functioned as a colonial settler-controlled state. Do you follow me very carefully? Listen, while the 52 African countries celebrate independence, Liberia celebrates her return in 1800. Guess what Ethiopia celebrates? Ethiopia celebrates her victory because she fought and defended her sovereignty and was not colonized. So both Ethiopia and Liberia has a unique history. Different story, but unique history. One Africa, one Akebulan. I hope you understand. Beautiful people, beautiful diversity, beautiful history, different story, the same struggle. Africa, the modern day town crier, the voice of Africa. I hope you understand, so you can understand and do what? And overstand. Because I taught you from the perspective of the one who understand. Africa, wisdom is the principal thing. Support modern day town crier in any way you can. Because I am starting my institutional tour very soon when I go to universities, polytechnic and college of education around Africa and teach African students about African history. Bringing back that which they think that is lost. Africa, wisdom is the principal thing.
Learn to be a teacher and not just a content creator. Just for 14 days with Modern Day Town Crier.